Hello, welcome to another episode of Forgotten Cemeteries, Pacific Northwest. Today we're at the very cold Patton Cemetery. It's 19 degrees outside. It's located at Raleigh Hills, Oregon, Washington County. Alternative names this one are Patton with one T, Portland Golf Course, because there's a golf course across the street, Raleigh Patton family, and Welch's. So let's go meet some local residents and hear their story. A little bit about the history of the cemetery. Is established in 1859. Oregon Burial Site Guide says 0 to 25 burials, but Find a Grave has shown around 103 memorials added so far, and it is bigger than 25, I can tell just walking through. We saw a bunch of Pattons at Cherry Grove Cemetery, but I believe most of the family members were originally from a farm plot that were moved at one time. This area is Raleigh. You first think of North Carolina, but the area seems to be named after Raleigh Robinson, whose parents came to Oregon in 1851. 1851 seems like a difficult year to find info, but I did come across this cool book if you're a reader interested. On the Oregon Trail in 1851, Canaries, Buffalo Chips, and Elephants. A very odd title. Coincidentally, I'm thinking Raleigh Robinson is buried in this cemetery, but he must have said nope, because he's buried in Tigard at the massive Crescent Grove Cemetery. Shockingly, not much on his Find a Grave profile for some reason. Only other info there was there's a post office named Raleigh in 1892 in this area, and it closed in 1904, so pretty short run. At first glance, I thought this would be a plain vanilla cemetery until I discovered the deep history and stories hidden here. Lots of interesting, not only Oregon history, but national. A woman with perhaps the worst luck ever with men, a pioneer woman versus badger story, a life lesson on why you should never fall asleep next to a fireplace, and a final sad story of a little girl that got lost during a lightning storm. Our first stop is Mathew Patton. His name's on the other side, but his wife, we're kind of pointing the camera on her side of the headstone. But Mathew was born in 1805, the earliest birth year headstone in this cemetery, I believe. As mentioned, he was married to Polly Patton, who was born in 1810. Pretty early arrival to Oregon, immigrating in the year 1847. An article was weirdly written from what I got. He made a trip to California at one time, guessing in 1849, and came back with $10,000 of shiny stuff. I can only assume gold. He then went on to our beloved Yamhill County and got a donation land claim, then got some land in Oswego, where he mined the first ore to be smelted at Oregon Iron Works. If my research was correct, that was 1867, and there was this pipe dream actually that the Pittsburgh of the West would be created in this area, the steel industry pretty much. This would become the first company west of the Rocky Mountains to smelt iron. You can actually visit an old restored furnace down in Lake Oswego if you're interested. However, cheap imports from Scotland pretty much held them hostage in a sense, profit-wise. In addition, I came across something called the Panic of 1893. Just the complete collapse of farm production, stocks, banks, railroad investments, wheat prices crashed. It was pretty messy. This caused a mass movement of people withdrawing their money from banks, causing bank runs. I came across these cool photos as well. One cartoon from 1896, and then a second one from 1932, and as if the bank wasn't already painful enough, check out those photos and lines. Got to the point where J.P. Morgan had to bail out the country and used like $60 million in bonds. But back to Mathew. In 1888, he had plans to build a home for the friendless, aged, and others. Today, the facility provides service for low-income families, the elderly, and disabled, and a drug and alcohol-free setting. So you could say William left a pretty big mark in history in the area. Our second stop is John A. Patton, who was born in 1831 in Tippecanoe, Illinois. There was some confusion whether he came in 1850 or 1847, but a lot of sources said 1847. He did marry a woman in 1855 named Margaret Lovisa Simmons Welch, and it appears they had 3 children together, but another article said 4. I'm sure you're seeing a young death at 33 by now on the headstone. Well, that's because in December of 1864, Portland was a happening place, and John returned home from one crazy night of bar hopping. He had trouble getting into bed, I guess. He was so lit. He decided to sleep out by the fireplace. Having difficulty getting to sleep, John rolled over and right into the fireplace. His shoes caught on fire, and his wife Margaret did her best to put out the fire. But by that time, the damage was done, and he would get a pretty bad infection and died, unfortunately. In fact, he died December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. This would obviously put her in a difficult spot, but speaking of Margaret, wow, what a lot of bad luck with men. She would remarry 1 year later to a Daniel Elliott Mills, who was a teacher at the time. And apparently the Patton family was like sort of appalled that she married a commoner, to the point they harassed Daniel, and he just couldn't take it anymore. Daniel would disappear one day into an unpopulated area, is what a report said. Allegedly, it looks like he just left her, in my opinion. She would divorce him on the grounds of a desertion, and sadly, Margaret kind of like made up a story for her children. Kind of hard to explain to them that the father just left, but she was telling them that Daniel went on to fight with Custer in the U.S. Army and died at Little Bighorn. I did find a Civil War draft listing, and he is listed as D.E. Mills, and occupation is teacher, so perhaps he did fight in the Civil War for Wisconsin. However, we're about to find out what really happened to Daniel Mills. He wasn't discovered in Oregon, he didn't die in the Civil War, or on the battlefield of Little Bighorn. Daniel was found by two men laying on the bank of Pacontca River in Wisconsin. If we have any Wisconsin people out there, translate. It appeared he died of a stroke, and no water was present in his lungs. At the time, Daniel was the oldest living teacher in Wisconsin and exhausted his finances. He planned on living his days out at the county house, and strangely enough, Daniel kept telling old friends at the meeting this would be his last visit. And then he just died. It was weird. It was like he kind of saw his death coming. So, back to Margaret. So, husband number 3. She would marry a guy named Ralston Carlton Welch, a Civil War veteran of the Oregon Infantry. The Pattons again would harass Ralston as well, and to the point Ralston had enough. He packed up his family and then moved to Palouse, Washington, considered one of the 7 wonders of Washington. Kind of looks like Central Ohio to me, but all right. Things worked out pretty well at first, and I came across a crazy story of Margaret hearing some chaos in one of her chicken houses. You can imagine Margaret was pretty battle-hardened at this point. So she grabs a lead pipe on her way to the chicken house. She discovers a badger with one of her hens hanging out of its mouth. I guess Margaret gets like super pissed off and beats the badger to death with a lead pipe. She also skinned the badger, tanned it, and made a carriage rope for her daughter, so put it to use. However, by the year 1889, I guess Ralston was like really messing up. He was forgetting supplies, constantly getting just in the bad situations for the family, especially during the winter. So Margaret had enough, loaded her family, and returned to the Patton Valley to her farm. She would die in 1919 at the age of 80 and is buried at Pioneer Cemetery in Washington. Our third and final story is of Maddie Badger. She was born in 1893 and sadly died in 1905 at the age of 12. I don't believe she has a headstone here. I didn't see any pictures on Find a Grave, or maybe we'll find it during our tour, hopefully. Never know. But she was struck by lightning at a location called Council Crest. Council Crest is apparently the highest point in Portland and is 11 minutes from the cemetery by car. And this is from the Daily East Oregonian in June of 1905. Last Wednesday morning, Maddie Badger left her home on the Patton Road below Council Crest in search of the cows, which had not been seen for 2 days. Just before the storm Wednesday afternoon, Maddie was seen by Mrs. R.T. Dickerson sitting by the road eating wild strawberries. The girl was alone, although she had started out with her younger brother and sister. When she did not return home that night, her father called some neighbors and an all-night search began. The body was found around 9:30 a.m. yesterday morning by Mr. C. Thompson, one of the search party members, who was guided by the spot of a dog which had Maddie's body. The body was lying face upward in a dense thicket where the child had run from shelter from the storm. The lightning struck just above the steel corset stay, fractured her right shoulder blade, and passed out at the hip. The clothing was burned where the lightning struck the body and where it left it. So that's the end of that newspaper clipping. Not sure what the Badger's relationship is to the Pattons, but Maddie's parents are buried at Riverview Cemetery. In the year 1900, they were listed as living in San Francisco, but unsure when they exactly came to Oregon. So, like I said, no marker for little Maddie, from my understanding. All right, time for the tour, and you're greeted by, once again, fancy signs. I don't know. Find a Grave said that the club doesn't mind if you visit the cemetery. We got the famous security cam thing. So I think we'll just do our things. This is interesting. Interesting repair. We've never seen that. Just two plates with some all thread holding a headstone together. It's a nifty little design. Keep thinking we'll see Maddie's little headstone. There is a lot of vandalism here, so maybe that's why they put up those signs. I can't blame them on that one. Hey, there's the 3 rings. I don't know who this individual was. They got a pretty epic memorial. I think this is Purser. Kind of a young death. Unique headstone there as well. So it looks like there's some recent Pattons as well. We talked about John Patton. I'd say he has the prettiest headstone in the cemetery. It's very clean and well maintained. You see the Mason symbol on William Patton's. Over here, there was quite a bit of vandalism, I'm assuming. Well, imagine headstones break 5 times. And that one right there. And there are some just missing completely. But overall, it's a kind of a odd cemetery overall. I don't know. Not a whole lot of stories I could find, unfortunately. Obviously of William Patton and going on there, John Patton and little Maddie. That was pretty much it for this one. This actually was going to be my first cemetery that I visited, but it's a busy area. Like, you kind of have to pick a day like January 1st. So Happy New Year to everyone out there if you're watching. Hope you enjoyed this one. Sorry it's a short video. A little bit of cool history about Raleigh Hills and the Pattons and their journey here. So if you have any other recommendations for cemeteries to visit in Oregon or Washington, feel free to comment. Thanks for watching, and hope you had a great New Year's. Stay safe out there.